They say you can't outrun your past, but I figured a weekend retreat in the mountains might give me a head start. I needed the air, the space, the silence. A pause button, maybe, something to press while I sorted through the emotional static in my chest. My job was eating me alive. My last relationship ended in a quiet implosion, and I hadn't slept through the night in weeks. So when my old college friend Ethan messaged me out of nowhere, got a spot open at the spa I work at if you're up for a reset, I said yes before I could think twice. He ran a holistic retreat now, tucked into the hills just past the tree line of some nameless town. I hadn't seen him in years, but his name still stirred something low in my stomach. Nostalgia, maybe. Or maybe something I hadn't wanted to name. Ethan had always been the kind of person who made life feel bigger. In college, he was the guy with spontaneous road trip ideas at 2 a.m. and a habit of sitting too close when we watched movies. I used to think he didn't notice how often our knees touched, how I held my breath every time he leaned in to whisper something during class. But maybe I just didn't want to risk finding out. He met me at the front entrance of the retreat, all soft linen and sun-kissed skin, like he'd stepped out of a meditation app. Still hate nature? He grinned, pulling me into a one-armed hug that smelled like cedar wood and some kind of herbal oil. I've made peace with trees, I said, trying to sound normal while my pulse sprinted. Still allergic to bees, though. Noted, he laughed, eyes crinkling at the corners. No outdoor picnics, got it. His presence felt the same, warm, easy, dangerously familiar. But something had changed. The way he looked at me lingered. Just a second too long. The way his fingers brushed mine when he handed me a key card. The way he didn't flinch when our hands touched. He looked like someone who'd come into himself. Confident in a way that made my chest ache. The room he gave me overlooked a clearing where wind threaded through tall grass. Everything felt still here, like the world had agreed to wait while I figured myself out. Inside, the cabin was all polished wood and soft lighting. There was a single white robe hanging on a hook, and a note scribbled in messy handwriting on the bed. First session, tomorrow. Be ready for something different. I read it 3 times. Then I tucked it into my bag like it meant something. Maybe it did. I'd come here to clear my head. But with Ethan around again, all I could think about were the things we'd never said, and the ones I wasn't sure I could keep to myself this time. Ethan and I weren't always this careful with each other. Back in college, things were looser, simpler in that chaotic, caffeine-fueled kind of way. We met during orientation, both lost, both late, both pretending we had it all figured out. He offered me half of his protein bar and told me I looked like someone who needed saving. I told him he looked like someone who enjoyed being right. Somehow, that was the beginning. We fell into an easy rhythm after that. Study partners who never really studied, late-night taco runs, movie marathons that always ended with one of us asleep on the other's shoulder. He had this way of making everything feel lighter, like maybe life didn't have to be a mess. Or at the very least, it was okay if it was. Now, 5 years later, that old rhythm was still there, just buried under the quiet hum of grown-up awkwardness and too much time apart. On my second morning at the retreat, Ethan found me in the communal kitchen, trying and failing to work the antique French press. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me struggle with an infuriatingly amused expression. "You still make coffee like it's a science experiment," he said. "Because it is. You try waking up without caffeine and a will to live." He chuckled and stepped in, gently nudging me aside. "Let me show you the art of not overcomplicating everything." "Ah, so we're doing life metaphors already?" I teased. His eyes crinkled again. Only the best ones. We slipped into old patterns like worn-in shoes, casual banter layered with something quieter underneath. Something that caught in my throat when his fingers brushed mine over the coffee cup. something that made me forget what I was saying whenever. He looked at me too long. Later that afternoon, he offered to take me on a hike. Easy trail, he promised, though I quickly learned Ethan's definition of easy was questionable at best. The air was crisp, pine-scented. Sunlight filtered through the trees like it had a secret. I kept sneaking glances at him as he walked a few paces ahead, confident, relaxed, occasionally tossing comments over his shoulder to check if I was still alive. "You always breathe." "That loud when you're pretending to be athletic?" he called. "I'm conserving energy. It's a survival tactic." He grinned, slowing down until we were side by side. "Sure it's not just dramatic flair?" "Could be both." About halfway through, the clouds rolled in without warning, thick and fast. Within minutes, a sharp wind kicked up and rain followed. Not the gentle, romantic kind. The why didn't I check the forecast kind. We ducked into a narrow overhang, near a cluster of boulders just wide enough to keep us mostly dry. Mostly. "Should we turn back?" I asked, already soaked through. "Trail's too slippery now," Ethan said, shaking rain from his hair. We waited out. So we waited. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. The silence stretched between us, softened by the rain. I should have said something. A joke, maybe. A comment about the weather. Anything to keep my thoughts from spiraling into dangerous places, like how good he smelled, earthy, clean, familiar, or how I could feel the heat of his thigh against mine, even through our damp jeans. Looked over at me, slow and steady. "You okay?" His voice was softer here, sheltered from the world. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just forgot how much I hate surprises." "Still can't handle a little unpredictability," he teased. But there was something else in his tone, something that made my breath catch. His eyes lingered, longer than they should have, and I didn't look away. Something passed between us in that moment, unspoken, unfinished, but it was real. I shifted slightly, letting my knee brush his. He didn't pull back, and neither did I. By the time the rain finally let up, the trail had turned into a slick mess of mud and moss. Every step back toward the retreat felt like a gamble. I slipped twice. Ethan caught me both times, once by the elbow, once by the waist. Both times, his touch lingered longer than necessary. "You okay?" he asked again, his brow knit with concern that was too soft, too familiar. I nodded, even though my ankle ached and my heart was trying to claw its way out of my chest. "I'm good. Just regretting every decision that brought me here." He grinned. "Come on, we're not that far. We were that far. And when we finally made it back to the cluster of cabins, we were soaked, muddy, and thoroughly miserable." I limped slightly, trying not to make it obvious. "You should rest that ankle," Ethan said, eyeing me sideways as we reached the porch. "I'll be fine." "You're limping. I'm dramatic." "You're both." He opened the door to his cabin and looked at me like it wasn't a question. "Get in. You're not going back to yours like that. The trail's too dark now." I hesitated on the threshold, dripping and cold and acutely aware of how everything suddenly felt. Different. "Come on," he said gently. "It's just one night." That's what I was afraid of. Inside, the place smelled like cedar and soap. Simple. Warm. His backpack was half unzipped in the corner, a flannel shirt draped over the back of a chair. It felt lived in. Safe. A little too safe. "You can take the bed," he said, already moving to lay a blanket down on the small couch. "It's not big, but—" "I can sleep on the floor," I interrupted, trying to sound casual. "I don't want to kick you out of your own bed." Ethan looked at me like I'd grown another head. "I'm not letting you sleep on the floor with a hurt ankle." "So what? You sleep on the floor?" "I've done worse." He flashed a quick smile, then tossed the blanket onto the couch and started peeling off his wet hoodie. Underneath, his t-shirt clung to him, damp and thin and entirely unfair. I looked away too fast. I turned toward the small bathroom, using it as an excuse to catch my breath. The mirror showed exactly what I felt. Damp hair plastered to my forehead. Rain-flushed cheeks, eyes too wide with something I couldn't name. Back in the room, Ethan had already changed into dry clothes. He offered me a pair of his sweatpants and a hoodie, and I took them with mumbled thanks, trying not to notice how they smelled like him. When I emerged again, he was sitting cross-legged on the bed, fiddling with a flashlight. I hovered awkwardly, unsure where to stand, what to say. "I'm not gonna bite," he said without looking up. "You say that now." He chuckled and patted the spot next to him. "Sit. Elevate your ankle. Doctor's orders." I obeyed, gingerly resting beside him. The bed wasn't large. Our knees touched, then our thighs, and neither of us moved. Silence stretched. I stared at my hands, heart hammering in my chest. He was close. So close I could feel the warmth radiating off him. So close I could smell the faint hint of soap and cedar on his skin. I wanted to say something. Anything. But everything in my chest felt tangled. Because if I said it, if I crossed that line, what if everything we'd built unraveled? He leaned back on his hands, glancing over at me. "You're quiet. I'm just thinking. Dangerous." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You ever think about, I don't know, if we'd stayed close after college, if things might have been different?" Ethan's expression shifted. Just a flicker, just enough. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes." His voice was low, raw. And then he looked at me, really looked at me, and my breath hitched. I don't know if it was the storm still echoing in our bones, or the way the lamplight made everything feel softer, like a dream you didn't want to wake up from, but in that moment, it felt like the air between us changed. He reached over, absent-mindedly adjusting the pillow behind my ankle. His fingers brushed my shin, a casual touch, thoughtless, but it sent a jolt up my spine. "Thanks," I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on mine too long again, and I didn't look away. There it was again, that pause, that space between what we were and what we could be. "Ethan," I said, and my voice cracked around his name. He blinked. "Yeah, I..." Swallowed hard. "Nothing. Never mind." He didn't push, just gave a small nod and shifted a little closer. That night, we lay on the same bed, inches apart. Both pretending sleep came easy. I could feel the tension in the air between us. Electric, thick, waiting. My thoughts twisted into knots. Did he know? Did he feel it too? And if he did, why hadn't he said anything? But then again, why hadn't I? The silence between us stretched thin, hanging like breath in cold air. I sat with my knees drawn up on the edge of the fold-out bed, the one we'd both be sharing tonight thanks to the busted heater and fully booked lodge. Ezra leaned against the window across from me, his shoulders broad and relaxed, but his eyes flicked toward me with something unreadable, something softer than I'd ever seen. He hadn't moved back to his room, even though the snow outside had finally let up. He could have gone, but he didn't, and that meant something, didn't it? I swallowed, my mouth dry. "So, you do this a lot?" I asked, just to break the silence. "Offer half-naked massages to guys in your brother's spare room?" He grinned. And damn it, it did something to me. Unlocked this whole fluttering chaos in my chest. Only to guys who look like they need it. "You've been tense since you got here. You think I didn't notice?" "You notice everything," I muttered. Ezra tilted his head, curious. "What's that supposed to mean?" I hesitated. Everything inside me wanted to stay in safe territory. Jokes, teasing, surface level. Comfort. But the room had shrunk, like the tension between us had thickened, become something I couldn't laugh my way out of anymore. I just meant, you see people, I said, quieter. Like, really see them. It's unnerving. He chuckled softly. Coming from you? That's rich. You're like an open book written in invisible ink. Only shows up when no one's looking. I turned toward the window, the frost clinging to the edges. My chest ached in a way I didn't have words for. Ezra, why did you really stay in here? The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was heavy, intentional. He walked over, his socks whispering across the wooden floor. He sat beside me slowly, like he didn't want to scare me off. His thigh brushed against mine. I didn't move. I could ask you the same thing, he murmured. You let me touch you earlier. Not just let me. You leaned into it. I felt the heat rise to my face. Yeah, I did. I turned to him. His eyes were dark, but not unreadable anymore. Vulnerable, like he was laying something down between us and waiting to see if I'd pick it up. I don't know what this is, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been trying to pretend it's nothing. That it's just you being friendly. That I'm overthinking every glance, every time you touched me. Ezra nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. You're not overthinking it. My breath caught. He looked down at his hands, clasped between his knees. I've felt it too. Since you walked through that door. Hell, even before that, back when you used to come by the studio with Mark, I thought you were just shy, maybe didn't like me. I didn't know how to act around you, I confessed. Still don't. He let out a soft laugh. Join the club. There was a pause. Then he turned toward me fully, one leg drawn up on the bed so we were facing each other. I'm not good at this, he admitted. Feelings, talking about them, especially when they sneak up on me like this. Like, what? I asked. Like you. My throat tightened. The words, the way he said them, gentle, unguarded, they hit me right in the chest. Ezra, I said, my voice shaking, I've been terrified. Because if I admit this, if I admit I want something more, I don't know if I can go back to pretending it didn't happen. You don't have to pretend anymore, he whispered. My hand twitched on the bedspread, fingers curling in. Then his hand reached out, palm up, waiting. Not grabbing, not demanding. Just there. I looked at it, then at him, and I placed my hand in his. His thumb moved slowly across the back of my hand, a quiet rhythm that felt more intimate than anything we'd done so far. Can I kiss you? He asked. I nodded, barely. Yeah. He leaned in, slow like he wanted to savor the moment. I felt his breath before his lips. Our noses brushed, and the anticipation alone made my stomach somersault. Then finally, his lips met mine. It was soft, careful. A question more than a statement. But I kissed him back with everything I hadn't said, every stolen glance, every late-night thought, every what-if that had haunted me since we met. When we pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, breaths mingling in the dim, quiet room. That was, I began, but the words faltered. Ezra's voice was low, almost reverent. Yeah, it was. His fingers slipped between mine, weaving together like they were meant to fit there all along. I don't want this to be a one-night mistake, I whispered. Then let's not let it be, he said with a small, crooked smile. And just like that, something shifted between us. Something warm and terrifying and deeply right. I didn't know how long we sat like that, foreheads touching, his fingers still tangled with mine. The snow outside had softened into silence, the kind that made the whole world feel paused. It was like the universe had finally stopped spinning, just long enough for me to breathe. Ezra gave my hand a gentle squeeze and leaned back slightly to look at me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, and for once the truth didn't feel hard to admit. "Yeah, just full, you know? Like my chest can't hold everything in it right now." His lips curved into that slow, teasing grin I'd grown addicted to. That could be the effects of my special service. I rolled my eyes and nudged his shoulder, laughing. "You really think you're that good?" "You moaned," he said smugly. "Twice." "Shut up." I was blushing again, but this time it didn't feel embarrassing. It felt giddy. Ezra shifted, sitting cross-legged on the bed, pulling me to face him. "So, what happens now? Like after the snow melts and your muscles aren't a disaster anymore?" I hesitated, searching his face. "You want there to be an after?" He didn't even blink. "Yeah, I do." That simple honesty, it hit me, deeper than any grand gesture could have. I reached up and brushed a piece of hair off his forehead. "I do too. I just don't know how it works. You're Mark's brother, and I don't want this to be something we regret later." His expression softened. "I'm not going to regret kissing you. And if Mark's the problem, we'll deal with him together. I'm not hiding this. Not if it's real." "It feels real," I said. "It is." The warmth between us wasn't just from proximity anymore. It was something steadier, something that filled the quiet without needing to be named. He leaned into me again, our knees touching, and I rested my head on his shoulder. We sat like that for a while. No rush. No need to fill the silence with more than what we'd already said. Then, in a softer voice, Ezra added, "You ever think maybe this wasn't an accident? You coming here? Us ending up in this room together?" I pulled back just enough to look at him. "Fate?" He shrugged, his grin crooked. "Or maybe just really poor heater maintenance." I laughed and curled into his side, letting his arm wrap around me. "Well, I'm not complaining." His hand traced idle circles against my back. "You shouldn't. I only offer the deluxe package to people I want to see again." I looked up, smiling. "So I get a loyalty card now? 5 massages and you earn a kiss. Seems rigged. Only if you stop at 5. I kissed him again then. Slower, deeper, and with all the clarity that had been missing until now. It wasn't just a kiss anymore. It was a promise. When we finally pulled away, I whispered, "I don't want to go back to how it was before." Ezra nodded, his eyes serious. "Then don't. Stay the night. Stay longer if you want." I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I want. And in that small, quiet room, surrounded by snow and stillness and everything we'd been too afraid to say until now, I finally let myself believe it. This wasn't just a moment. It was a beginning. Morning light slipped in through the slats of the blinds, painting the room in a pale golden wash. I blinked awake slowly, my body aching in the best kind of way. Not from the hike, not from the cold, but from something warmer, softer. Ezra was still beside me, tangled in the sheets, one arm slung over my waist like he had no plans of letting go. His hair was a mess, his breathing even. And I lay there watching him, committing this version of him to memory, peaceful, present, and mine. We didn't say much when we finally stirred, just shared sleepy glances and lazy smiles as we got dressed. The silence between us had changed. It no longer felt like something to fill, but something we shared. As we packed up our things, I noticed he folded my hoodie and tucked it into my duffel bag like it was something precious. A small thing. But it landed like a weight in my chest. "Hey," he said, slinging his bag over his shoulder. You want to stop by that diner on the way back? The one with the greasy hash browns you hate but always order anyway? I raised a brow. Are you offering a ride home or a second date? He grinned. Both, obviously. Outside, the snow had melted just enough to reveal the edges of the road. A muddy slush clung to our boots, but the sky was clearer than it had been in days. Ezra unlocked his truck, and just before I climbed in, he tugged at my sleeve gently. I turned, and he was holding something out to me. It was the little bottle of eucalyptus oil from last night. His signature, the thing that had started it all. I want you to keep it, he said. Call it a reminder that this wasn't just about what happened in that room. I stared at it for a beat too long. I'll probably smell it every day now. He leaned in, pressing his lips briefly to my temple. Good. That's kind. Of the point. In the truck, he rested one hand on the wheel and reached over with the other, letting our fingers tangle easily on the center console. We didn't talk much on the drive. There was music and shared glances, and at one point, he started humming off key to a song I hated just to make me roll my eyes. It felt simple, honest. When we pulled up to my apartment, he didn't let go of my hand right away. So, he said, clearing his throat, we're not doing that thing where we pretend this was a one-time snowed-in hookup, right? I looked at him, full-hearted, smiling. Not unless your definition of one time includes breakfast plans and texting me every night. Good, he said, visibly exhaling, because I was planning to ask when I get to take you on a real date. You mean one that doesn't involve a busted radiator and thermal socks? Exactly. I leaned in, brushing my lips over his again. Light, familiar now. Soon, I whispered. As I got out of the truck, I tucked the little eucalyptus bottle into my coat pocket. Warm, against my chest. He waved as I reached my door, and just before he drove off, he shouted something through the open window. 5 massages still gets you a kiss. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the worst businessman. Only for you. And as he disappeared down the street, I stood there on the sidewalk, wind in my hair, my heart both lighter and fuller than I'd thought possible when I arrived at that cabin. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of something I'd been afraid to want until now.